Hi, welcome to the Itihasa channel. Today we discuss the events that followed the burning of the Great White Palace, the House of Lac. Om Namah Shivaya, Om Nagendraya Namaha, Om Amme Narayana, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Om Ganeshaya Namaha, Om Anjanaya Namaha, Om Subramanyaya Namaha, Swamiye Sharanamayappo, Om Guruve Namaha. So we discussed how Purochana had built a great white palace made out of lacquer and had asked the Pandavas and their mother Kunti to come and stay there after they spent a few days in the ancient palace of Kashi. And we discussed how Kunti had called for a large feast a few days before the great moonless night of Amavasya, when they thought Purochana would set the palace on fire. And Kunti had called a huge feast for all the poor people of the area. And when she noticed there was a Nishada woman with her 5 children, approximately the build of the Pandavas, she took them separately, fed them food and strong liquor, and got them into a deadly stupor, and allowed them to sleep in that great white palace. On the other side, Bheema plied Purochana with drinks to an extent where he too got into a deathly drunken stupor and also lay himself down on the floor of the palace. And then in the dead of the night, after sending the miner away back into Kashi city, the 5 Pandavas and their mother got down into the tunnel. Bheema set the house on fire and they ran through the tunnel, coming out in the heart of the jungle that lay behind the great white palace. And then the palace went up in flames. Flames started leaping high into the air because of the incendiary material that the palace was made up of. And the crackling and the sounds of the collapsing structures woke up the people of Kashi, who, when they came out of their houses, saw this huge burning conflagration in the distance. And then they all came and gathered round the palace and realized it was a palace in which the Pandavas and their mother Kunti were staying. And there were laments and cries all around, men weeping openly, women hitting their breasts and crying and screaming, and cursing the king Dhritarashtra and his evil son Duryodhana, who had caused this evil game. And they started crying and screaming, abusing the people of Hastinapura for having killed their beloved princes, for having concocted an absolutely derisive plan that would bring these innocent people, these humble and this wonderful family of the Pandavas and their mother Kunti, to the great city of Kashi and put them in this great palace that was built to be their funeral home. As the palace burned down to ashes, the people started pouring in pails of water to cool down the burning embers so that they could come into the main palace to search for the Pandavas to see if there could be any signs of life inside the palace. Accompanying them was this miner, who covered himself with a blanket to protect himself from the searing heat in the heart of the palace. Stealthily and quietly, he stayed away from the group of people who had come trying to search for survivors, walked towards the room where the tunnel was built, and with a spade in his hand, he covered the hole with the bits of broken masonry that were around, ensuring that nobody would know that the tunnel was dug out. And then among the wails could be heard the people who noticed the dead corpses of the 5 bodies, which were supposedly of the Pandavas and their mother Kunti, which were actually of the Nishada family. And seeing these 6 bodies lying down in the heart of the palace, these people started wailing and screaming even more. And as they walked around, they saw the body of Purochana and they started throwing stones at it, for they knew this was the evil man who had set fire to the great white palace and had been burnt because he couldn't get out in time. And messengers were sent to the great city of Hastinapura with this horrible news. There in the city, when the news came in the courtroom that the Pandavas had been burnt in the palace and their burnt out bodies were seen in the center of the palace, the vile Dhritarashtra broke down into sobs He started lamenting loudly and started screaming about how his dear brother Pandu was the dearest to him, and his five children were as dear to him as his own children. Why, they were more dear to him than his own children. And true to Kanika's playbook, he started lamenting and sobbing wildly and loudly for everyone to see, crying copious tears and showing everybody that his heart was the most wrecked because of this death of the Pandavas. And taking his cue, the Kaurava brothers all started screaming and crying in absolute delirium, pretended delirium, taking the names of the great Pandavas, oh Yudhishthira, oh Bhimasena, oh Falguna Arjuna, oh Nakula, oh Sahadeva, oh sons of Mantri, how could you leave us like this? How could you leave us and go to the afterworld? And screaming and crying. And it was quite obvious that was the show they were putting on. But the acting was quite good. They were excellent actors, having been able to muster out tears in an instant. And then Dhritarashtra proclaimed that no money should be spared in giving a beautiful funeral for these five children and their mother, Prita Kunti. And so in the palace, there was doom and gloom all around. Bhishma was absolutely dejected. He knew he had sent his spies out to help Vidura figure out the plan, but he was not sure if the Pandavas were alive, and he was absolutely devastated. He had resigned to the fact that his beloved Hastinapur kingdom would finally come to the Kauravas and be ruined, and there was nothing he could do or say, for he was just a regent in name and he had no proper say in the running of the kingdom. And in this time of distress, he was looking to Vidura for support. And Vidura, though was shedding tears and was crying once in a while, seemed strangely calm and placid. And this brought some amount of hope to Bhishma, for he knew if Vidura was not as sad and as devastated as he was or as the others were showing themselves to be, then he must have some news that the Pandavas would have escaped. But then what were these bodies that were being brought to Hastinapur, the burnt bodies of the five young men and their mother? And Bhishma was a little confused. But the next day, Vidura seemed a little more calm, a little too calm for someone who loved the Pandavas dearly. And he went into Vidura's room and asked him, "What's the reason for your calmness? Is it what I'm thinking?" And Vidura nodded and said, "Yes. I had sent a man, a miner, to tunnel down in the bottom of the palace, to create a tunnel that would give an escape route for the Pandavas and their mother deep in the jungle behind the great white palace. And he has come back to me and said that the plan was successful and the Pandavas and their mother are safe. But let us not show our happiness right now. Let us still mourn with all the others." And Bhishma, with a lighter heart, came out of Vidura's room, knowing now that the doomsday scenario he had pictured for his kingdom of Hastinapur wouldn't come yet, and there was still hope that the Pandavas would come back and rule this great kingdom and take it to its former glory. And so, when the corpses of the five brothers and the mother came back to Hastinapur, the entire city, Hastinapur, was back in absolute gloom and doom. The same feeling they had at the time of the funeral of Pandu and Mantri came back to the people of Hastinapur. And this time they couldn't openly criticize King Dhritarashtra and his son Duryodhana, for they knew there were spies of Duryodhana all around, and retribution for showing anger against the Kauravas might come. And so anger against the Kauravas and Dhritarashtra were little subdued during this time. And the five Nishada boys and their mother got a funeral they could never have dreamt of. A funeral fit for kings, a funeral fit for the princes of Hastinapur. Deep in the jungle, the Pandavas lay tired at the mouth of the tunnel that opened up. And Yudhishthira looked at Bhimasena and said, Duryodhana is sure to send his spies all around Kashi and even deep into the jungle to see if there were signs of life. If we have escaped, for even though the corpses of the Nishada boys and their mother are there as proof in the palace, he would still send his spies out to make doubly sure that we are genuinely dead and not alive. It is time we keep as much a distance as possible between the palace and ourselves to ensure that the spies don't come across us. Let us start walking towards the Ganga. And in fury, they started running towards the Ganga, trying to hold their mother. Bhima would hold his mother Kunti and carry her on his back, and the others would all rush towards the Ganga, and finally they reached towards the Ganga. There, in the dark, they started to search for a point in the Ganga which was not too deep where they could swim across. And suddenly there came across them a strange looking man. He was thin and tall with wavy hair, and his body glowed a little like he had some Gandharva blood in him. And he bowed down to Yudhishthira and said, Your uncle Vidura has sent me. And he spoke in the same Lecha Bhasha, the same Lecha language that Vidura had spoken to Yudhishthira, and told him the same words about the jackal who would be safe by digging a tunnel deep below the ground and would escape from weapons which were unlike blades of steel which could damage and kill human flesh. And hearing these words, Yudhishthira knew that this was a trusted man sent by Vidura himself, and told him, Take us across the Ganga. And then the Mahabharata describes something absolutely marvelous. There, this tall, gaunt man whose skin shone in the dark like it was glowing a phosphorus glow in the dark, took them to a boat, a marvelous boat. And the Mahabharata describes 5 to 7,000 years ago clear descriptions of a boat made of metal. A boat made of metal and a flat bottom, without sails, without oars, on which these Pandavas could sit. And as these Pandavas and their mother got into the boat, the oarsman had put his hands on some mechanism at the back of the boat, and the boat made a humming sound and started moving in the water, dark, deep in the night. Without oars and without sail, the boat made a swift movement through the water upstream against the currents of the Ganga. Against the gushing waters of the Ganga which flowed down, the boat moved against it upstream. With absolute speed and precision, the man was able to maneuver the boat through the boulders that jutted out through the Ganga. And a constant humming was all the sound that came from the boat. This was obviously a motorboat. A motorboat with a outboard motor quite powerful enough to go through the rapids of the Ganga, steer itself comfortably through the rocks that protrude out through these rapids, and go upstream quite a distance to the other side of the Ganga and far upstream, creating a wide distance between that burning palace of Lac and the Pandavas. And finally, when they reached a point on the other side of the Ganga, far upstream, the boatmen moved the boat to the edge, got down, touched the feet of Pritha, Kunti, Yudhishthira, and the Pandavas, and said, It is with great pleasure that I see you alive. For every day while you have been in that palace, I have been here at night waiting for you to come, not knowing when you would arrive. Every night in the dark, I would go up and down the Ganga, hoping to see signs of life and hoping to see you. And finally, on the day when I saw the flames rising and I hadn't seen you for some time, I was worried whether you were stuck in that burning palace of Lac. And my heart skipped a beat when I saw movement in the distance, and I saw a rumble as the great Bheema Sena, followed by the 4 brothers and his mother, came dashing towards the Ganga. And I knew you were safe. And it is this happiness that with this happiness I know that the future of Hastinapura is safe. please go safely. The great Vidura has told you to disguise yourself and be aware of spies all around. For the spies of the Duryodanas traverse through the land searching for signs of life of the Pandavas. Disguise yourself well and go east, and you will find safety in some of the small villages that you see in the distance. And so saying, this Gandharva like figure left. But by then the Pandavas were exhausted, Kunti was exhausted, and Yudhishthira looked at Bhima Sena and said, we are at the edge of a forest here. We have to go through this forest if we have to reach a civilized habitat where we can stay. This forest looks dark and deep, and we do not have the strength to cover it in this state of exhaustion. Bhimasena, could you carry us across this dense jungle? And Bhimasena, that son of Vayu, that son of Kunti who had been made 100 times stronger by drinking the Nagamrita in Nagaloka, took his mother on his shoulders, took the twins Nakula and Sahadeva and placed them on his hip, and then took Arjuna and Yudhishthira, all of whom were really exhausted, in his arms, and started running into the dense jungle at the edge of the Ganga river. And how he ran like the wind. He ran carrying his 4 brothers and his mother on his body, with his strides covering hillocks and plains, traversing small brooks and streams. As he ran, the earth thundered under him and his foot sank with every step that he took. It was said that his speed was so great that the brothers swooned and the mother swooned as the branches hit them on the face as he ran through the dense jungle. There were times when he would come across large trees barring his path, and he would use his foot to kick down the tree, and it would fall down with a shattering sound, and the earth would shake when he would kick the tree down. And having created a path in front of him, he rushed through the jungle, trying to go as far as possible as he could from the palace of wax, the palace of lacquer. And as he kept running, the forest started becoming denser and denser until he reached a deathly dark forest where there was not a sound of a bird, of an animal, of any being or any creature around. There was an eerie silence in this deathly dark forest. And he set his brothers and mother down, and they were exhausted with thirst. And they said, Bhimasena, we are thirsty, we can barely stand. Then taking them back in his shoulders, he started going around searching for a place where they could find water to drink. And as he roamed round across this deathly still jungle, feeling the strain of his brothers and mother on him, he realized that there was no water to be found. And suddenly he came across a huge giant peepal tree, an ashwatha tree. He kept his mother and brothers down along the large roots, hanging roots of this tree, and told them, I hear water birds close by. There must be a source of water nearby. Let me go and get you water to quench your thirst. And so saying, the Bhimasena started following the sounds of the water birds and presently came to a large lake. He jumped into the lake and cooled his body that had grown fiercely hot from running 80 yojnas with his brothers and his mother on his back. Having cooled down, he quaffed in huge gulps of water. And finally, having quenched his thirst, he took his upper garment and wet it completely and soaked it with water and ran to where his brothers and mother lay. And there, tenderly waking them up one by one, he opened their mouth and poured and squeezed the upper cloth and the water into their mouth, quenching their thirst. He made multiple trips from where they lay to the water, bringing in more and more water with this upper cloth. and one by one he quenched the thirst of all his brothers and his mother. And it pleased him to see that slowly the color came into their eyes and slowly the skin on their face started to look a little fresh. A little life started seeping into them. And then he told them, "You'll lie down and sleep and rest, for I shall stand here and stay and watch over you, so that no harm shall come over you." And the exhausted brothers and the mother quickly fell off to sleep, having quenched their thirst. As Bhimasena stood above them, watching them, tears started flowing down his face. For all the strength that Bhimasena possessed, he was an extremely sensitive soul. He loved his brothers and his mother intensely. And even in the future, when he was married to Draupadi, he was the one person who would love Draupadi intensely. Though the feeling was not reciprocated on Draupadi's side, she always loved Arjuna more, but the intensity with which Bhimasena would love Draupadi was unparalleled. He was at her beck and call, and if she wanted a flower and there was a flower that would bring a smile on her face, it would be Bhimasena who would bring that flower. And if there was something that would bring a smile on her face, it would be Bhimasena who would do it. He couldn't bear a tear on her eye, and seeing the tears in that palace where the game of dice was being played, it was Bhimasena who broke down and swore to kill all the Kauravas. Bhimasena was the most sensitive of all the brothers and one of the most intelligent. Looking at his mother, Kunti lay down on the bare ground, it broke his heart and he cried. He said, "O daughter of Kunti Bhoja, O sister of Vasudeva, the daughter-in-law of Vichitravirya lies down here on this hard earth. You deserve to lie on silken beds covered by silken sheets, and yet you lay on this hard earth. The great Yudhishthira, the person who is an incarnate of Dharma himself, who is the crown prince of Hastinapur, who should be ruling the kingdom from a large, marvelous golden throne, lies on this soil with the root of this Ashwatha tree giving him support. Falguna Arjuna, the dark-skinned great warrior whose skin is the color of wet thunderclouds, lies down exhausted in this soil. He should be on a chariot fighting wars and getting glory to this land, and here he is exhausted lying. And what face shall I show my mother Madri that her two children, Nakula and Sahadeva, lie down on this hard earth in the middle of this jungle, absolutely exhausted? Oh, my life that I have to sit and watch my brothers and my mother who lie down in exhaustion in the middle of the jungle. If my brother Dharmaraja had not stopped me, I would have gone right back to Hastinapur and broken the bones of Duryodhana and even killed his father Dhritarashtra for having put my brothers to this misery. How we have to run through the tunnels in the jungle like rats and jackals to escape a fire created by my cousin Duryodhana. Oh, what a life it is that I have to be quiet and bear and be calm in face of this horrendous life when I could have just killed them in the palace. It is my brother's Dharma, whose temper has not been roused yet, that I sit here in depression because of what I see in front of me. And so saying, this great Bhimasena kept looking over his brothers and mother as it became dawn. But even though it had become dawn, their exhaustion was not completely satiated, and they lay in an exhausted stupor in the middle of the forest under that Ashwatha tree. This dark forest where not a creature roamed, this dark forest which was silent as death, was Hidimbavana. And obviously in this great deathly silent forest called Hidimbavana had to be the Rakshasa Hidimba. It is said that the Rakshasa Hidimba was a huge Rakshasa as tall as a Sala tree. It is said that he had hair and beard fiery red and shoulders broad as a large tree, hands as large as tree trunks, and a huge pot belly from eating all the creatures of the land. His claws were sharp, and as he scratched his head, he looked around in absolute wild disgust at the place around him. And it is said that people used to cower in fear and used to die of fear when they used to come in contact with him and even lay eyes on him. Such was the fiery, deathly look that Hidimba had. And as he sat on a tree and sniffed around, he could smell human flesh. And it is said that this Hidimba, this vile Rakshasa, used to feast on human flesh and all the animals of the land. It was said that there was not a boar, not a pig, not a single creature in the forest that had not been hunted down by him. And when the land used to be devoid of creatures, he would feed on the berries and the fruits until some other unsuspecting creatures and humans would wander their way into the forest. And he had a sister called Hidimbi, who he looked at and told, "Do you not smell what I'm smelling? Do you not smell human flesh? It has been a long time since I have feasted on human flesh. I can still imagine myself sinking my fangs down into the soft, silken bodies of the humans. And as I would sink my fangs into their neck, their blood would spurt out of their neck and froth out. And I would drink that blood to my heart's content. Oh, how I miss the tasty blood of the humans and the tasty flesh of the humans. That raw meat and soft bones of the humans are nothing for me, and I would love to chew on them. Do you not get the smell of humans here, dear Hidimbi? Go and search for who the humans are and get them to me, kill them and bring them to me. For it's below my dignity to kill these ordinary humans myself, and I send you, O Hidimbi, to get them. Get them and we shall feast on them, and then we shall dance to wonderful songs in this beautiful forest, having feasted to our heart's content." And so saying, he looked at Hidimbi, his sister, who looked quite like him, who was sitting on another tree, and she slid down the tree, and with the wings on her back, as these Rakshasas, Hidimba and Hidimbi did, with the wings on her back out in full spread, she flew at rapid speed towards the scent that was awaiting her. And as she landed in front of the 5 Pandava brothers and Kunti, who lay next to the Ashwatha tree, something happened to her. And as she gazed at that huge man, Bheema Sena, who seemed to be looking around the jungle, taking care of his brothers and guard, something happened deep inside Hidimbi. Om Namah Shivaya. Om Nagendraya Namaha. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Anjaneyaya Namaha. Om Ganeshaya Namaha. Om Subramanyaya Namaha. Swami Sharanamayyappo. Om Guruve Namaha.